Associate Professor of Chemistry and has been chair of the Science Department since 2019. Before joining Chatham, Rob completed his PhD in organic chemistry from Northwestern University and then followed that with an NIH postdoctoral fellowship in the Department of Chemistry at the University of Pittsburgh. His scholarship here at Chatham is very student-centered and focused primarily on pharmaceutical drug discovery with multiple collaborators, both at Chatham, but also at UPMC Children's Hospital, Duquesne, and the University of Colorado at Boulder, where Rob did a sabbatical not that long ago. I could go on, but I know Rob is anxious to share with you some of the latest information about the sciences. So Rob, off to you.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Lambert, for that kind introduction, and to everyone else in the audience for this opportunity to share some of the exciting things that are going on in the sciences right now. You can see on the front slide here, we have a picture of the Buell Complex. Depending on how familiar you are with this building, it was originally built in 1929. The front half, the brick portion you can see. The back end was added on during a renovation in 2000, where the front half was also updated. Primarily on the back half of this is all teaching labs. The front half is classrooms, faculty offices, and independent research labs as well. We'll talk more about Buell a little bit here later on. So today I wanted to give you kind of a flavor of some things going on. First, start off with an overview of the science department, where we're at, some enrollment, some other things along those lines. Switch to really spending more of our time talking about some of the initiatives we're working on right now in the sciences, and maybe look at some potential new avenues that we could be exploring in the future, followed by some question and answer period, of course. So the degrees in the sciences, I tried to summarize the best I could in this table. What are the programs we offer? And so in the first column, we have the undergraduate programs at the top and the graduate programs on the bottom. The second column is that do we have a major, the third a minor, and then the related integrated degree programs right now. So our most popular program at the undergraduate level in the sciences is biology. More specifically, the human biology program makes up a little over half of our science students. And it is mainly students that are interested in pursuing degrees in the health professions, specifically in the area of physician's assistant studies. And our very strong graduate program in PA, really this nice IDP integrated degree program that we've developed is really the bedrock of kind of the majority of our students we have right now, is gaining a lot of interest of incoming students. The cell molecular biology program is meant for students interested in research or going to medical school. And so that's fairly popular as well. We have we have a Bachelor's of Arts degree as well in biology. And generally in sciences, the Bachelor of Science degrees are stronger, more complicated with higher requirements than the Bachelor of Arts degrees. Biochemistry, we offer dual degrees in chemistry as well, BS or BA. Mathematics and physics, and of course our new neuroscience program that we'll touch on a little bit here in a bit as well. At the graduate level, we have the MS Biology program, and we have a very new, last year was the first year, Master's of Arts in Biomedical Studies that has been really successful here so far, and we'll talk more about that on the next slide. In terms of the integrated degree programs we have the Chatham MPAS program. We have students that are going into the MS Biology program. We also have the Lake Erie College of Osteopathic Medicine agreement. And so just to kind of get an idea of this, we have currently enrolled at Chatham, we have 41 students that are guaranteed admits into our PA program, or they're planning on going into the PA program. And if they meet the requirements, they are guaranteed to be in that PA program, which is exciting. In the LECOM affiliation, which is pretty strong as well, we have 12 students right now in the pipeline that have either a 4+4 or a 3 years of undergraduate followed by 4 years of medical school agreement, where all they have to do is meet those requirements, graduate from Chatham, and they're into this LECOM program as well, which is really exciting. We also have students that go into the occupational therapy program at Chatham, the physical therapy program, and the athletic training, although most of those tend to come out of the psychology and exercise science students and not necessarily in the sciences. Enrollment in the science since 2014, to get an idea of this, the y-axis here on the left side, we're really looking at the number of students. The x-axis on the bottom, we're looking at the academic year. The top blue line is undergraduate enrollment over that time. So we've seen a steady increase in the undergraduate enrollment since 2014-15, with a large increase kind of with the introduction of this IDP process here in the 16-17 area, where we saw this big growth. The bottom blue line underneath that is the biology enrollment. So we can see that our overall enrollment is really tied directly to that biology enrollment. But if you look at the tail end of that, you can see the biology enrollment has kind of stayed pretty steady. I think we've hit a lot of that kind of availability right now, but we're still seeing some growth. So where is that growth coming from? At the bottom here, we have the orange, which is chemistry. You can see it's basically a plateau for chemistry and biochemistry, around 30 students every year. We have avenues to hopefully increase multiple of these majors here that we'll talk about here in a few minutes. The other ones that are pretty exciting, though, for growth opportunities, the gray line here on the bottom, it doesn't look like much on this axis, but from our math and physics combined students, which that's showing, we've gone from 5 students in 2014 to up to 14 in 2020. And we anticipate, looking at enrollment numbers right now, that we'll be up to 20 math and physics students starting this upcoming fall, about evenly split between those two disciplines, which is pretty exciting to see that kind of 300% growth over that time. And then environmental sciences, our other big growing program, that's the yellow line. It was as low as 2 students in 2016, reinvigorating that program, rebranding it, able to get that up to 40 students in 2020 with anticipated growth. Now, of course, the caveat of that is the environmental science, because of this growth and because of the idea to bring more exposure to Falk School sustainability in the environment, we'll be moving up to the Falk School starting in this upcoming fall, but we have a lot of close ties with them still. The MS Bio program, or MABS, as well, is this green line, the graduate program. So you can see that we saw a steady decline up until this past year, where we've seen it go back up, which is exciting. So the high of this was 42 in 2015. I think it might have been a little bit higher prior to that, but if we're just looking at the past 6 or 7 years, 42 in 2015, the low is 24 in 2019. We were back up to 39 students last fall. And this was primarily for an on-ground class, even during the pandemic, or an on-ground program, which is really exciting. Those numbers look like they're going to be higher as well. The major reason for that is we split the MS Biology into 2 programs, MS Biology and MABS, Master of Arts in Biomedical Studies, that I mentioned earlier, really for students that are interested in a 1-year accelerated, get me ready for prep for medical school, basically, is what these students are doing. And it's really, these programs exist all over the US, and ours are pretty popular. That program in particular has had some really good success. It's a high diverse program that should be noted as well. I think about half of the students, 45% of the students in the MABS program identify themselves as non-white. And so we're seeing this diversity in that as well, which is great. They've had high success in terms of getting students into graduate programs and medical schools too. So a lot to comment on in there. Not enough time today. So looking at Chatham's reach, I think this is really important to get an idea of how Chatham, or the science department, really is involved in all facets of kind of academics on campus. And so we're assigned in the School of Arts, Science, and Business on the main campus, teaching primarily undergraduate science majors, but also teaching all of the general education requirements for math and science for non-majors across the university. In addition to that, we have the MS Biology and the Master of Arts in Biomedical Studies at the graduate level. In addition to that, we teach classes for the School of Health Sciences, undergraduate exercise science students, which is a large program. They take their intro science classes from us and some of their upper level ones. We also teach anatomy and physiology classes for the Pathways to Nursing program. We also teach graduate level classes, anatomy, physiology, and neuroscience for the physical therapy and occupational therapy programs in the School of Health Sciences. In addition to that, we work with the Falk School of Sustainability. We have the new environmental science, or the environmental science program has obviously just moved over there, and we're still heavily involved with that. We teach a lot of classes for sustainability as well. And of course, the last one here is UPMC Nursing. We have a contract to teach courses of anatomy, physiology, and microbiology for nursing students enrolled in the UPMC Nursing. And so we do that on a regular basis as well. So we have our fingers in a lot of different places here academically, which is really exciting. And as we're doing this, and we have our students everywhere else, this is my nice little transition slide for some of the things we're going to be talking about here in a second. And the idea here is that all of our approaches are driven in student-centered learning. Our idea here is that really, as we're designing our courses, what is the content or the outcomes we want our students to understand? And then how do we design assessment and instructional methods to support that understanding of those outcomes? But of course, the other things that really matter on this are the engagement. How are the students invested in this material, and how do we help them do that? The interactions they have with other students and the faculty and staff, and also the environment that they're studying and learning in, and what does that look like? So all things we're going to talk about real briefly. So in the sciences, we have lots of outcomes. The most important one that we all think about, of course, is the content mastery idea, or understanding scientific concepts, which is an incredibly difficult thing to do for a lot of the students, but we work hard with them to get them to that point. And we're really proud of kind of the content understanding that our students come out of our program with. But that is one piece of the puzzle of things that we focus on. In addition to that, we really want to make sure we have real world experience through teaching labs, independent research, and internships for our students. We want to make sure that we really focus on information processing, specifically what are study habits, what are organizational skills are they using, what kind of metacognition or self-analysis of their approach are they looking at as well, again, to make well-rounded professionals when they get out of our program. We look at ways to disseminate their information, so we practice throughout the curriculum on presentations and writing, and we also look at ways throughout the curriculum that we're getting students working in team problem-solving scenarios so they can effectively contribute in group settings once they leave Chatham. To do that, we have a very strong group of faculty. And I apologize that you have to look at this, but I have a lot of faculty to fit in on this little slide. And so we have 23 full-time faculty at different levels in the sciences. They have hundreds of publications and presentations and over 300 years of collective teaching experience. A good portion might be in this room. After that, we to kind of summarize those a little bit more in the demographics, we have two students that are two faculty members that have tenure. We have 7 faculty members that have received capstone, or at least their first capstone appointment. And we have 9 faculty members that are on capstone track. You can see I'm always student centered. They're on this capstone track. And so we're about half and half. And when you think about that, that's great. That's a nice dynamic to have for our department and kind of that junior and senior faculty mix. We also have a handful of instructional or non kind of capstone track faculty that are doing teaching for us without the scholarship components. In addition to that, other things to kind of think about, we're about 10 to 15%, depending on the semester, of our classes being taught by adjunct instructors, which is pretty good compared to a national average on that. That's actually really excellent. The other thing that we've started experimenting that's interesting to know are these new graduate assistants that are teaching first-year undergraduate labs this year. We just started that. Lots of schools do this around the nation. We've never done that until just now, but it has 2 really benefits. One, it's a cheaper source of getting adjuncts to come in and teach classes for us, but it also gives scholarships to the graduate students and gets them excited and trains them, and we work together with them. So it's really a win-win across kind of those 2 levels. The next part of this we want to look at is the environment. And I wanted to quickly just talk about Buell and our classrooms. And so what I have here on this slide is the 4 lecture classrooms. We only have 4 classrooms in Buell. We do spread out into the C-134, which was formerly Sanger Auditorium and Coolidge. And we also use some of the other classrooms in Falk and Coolidge if we need to. But generally, we have all the science classes in Buell, in the Buell Science Complex. These are the lecture-based classrooms that we have here. All the black are time. We have in the axis here all the times in a normal day. We do go into the evenings for some classes as well, and a little bit earlier than 9 for a couple as well, and then the days of the week. The big takeaway here is that all the black are classes that we're already using in the sciences. The gray are classes outside of the sciences that are also using our space. You can see a lot of empty space here, but these are bigger classrooms as well, and I purposely try to leave those empty in schedulings, and pretty soon we'll have for the fall classes that aren't quite assigned yet, especially with our growing numbers across the university, where we're going to see classes from outside of the sciences moving into use these sort of larger classroom spaces that don't exist outside of our building everywhere. If you look at the spaces here as well, we have collaborative learning spaces. Instead of having rows of seating, these are seatings to engage students in active and learning environments. So they're clustered seatings where students are facing each other and working together in these collaborative environments. And really, this is the forefront of pedagogical methodology right now, is to have classrooms like this. So we have 2 of those, up to some pretty large classroom spaces when you see that as well. And we also have the Beckwith Auditorium, which is the second biggest meeting space on campus outside of Eddy Theater. If we're moving on and looking at our lab space, I think this is important to kind of get a feel for how we're really bursting at the seams a little bit in Buell right now too. So generally, Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, we don't have labs scheduled because that's where all of our lectures are really clustered. And because labs are 3 or 4 hours a piece, it's hard to fit them in there and have students that are able to make their schedules work. It's actually near impossible. So all of our labs are scheduled on Monday, Wednesday, Friday afternoons, and Tuesdays and Thursdays all day. So if you look at the labs that we have, or the 6 teaching labs we have, every Monday, Wednesday, Friday afternoon is filled. Every Tuesday, Thursday, all day is filled. So really, we are looking at all of our labs are maxed out right now for these current capacity. We already have a couple labs that are meeting in the evenings as well to make up for that. So a lot to take in. Again, a little time that I have to work with you today, get so much information across. So I want to talk about 3 initiatives that we're working on real quickly. And I'll spend a little bit of time on this slide because this is the most important stuff, really. And so first off, this is a former student who graduated in 2006, Hannah Gross, who's a biology student who I'm sure Dr. Lambert's smiling inside thinking about her as well. She's a really fantastic student. This isn't the best picture for technique, but it is a nice picture of a good student and it works well for advertising as well. She's currently finishing up in her 4th year in the LECOM med school program too, which is super exciting for her. So some of the things to think about here. About 5 years ago in 2016 or so, we switched from the tutorial format that we had done throughout the history of Chatham, which is every student is going to have to do a senior thesis, if you will, to having more of a capstone process, where in the capstone process, some students did independent research, and some of the students are also doing group survey projects. One of the major things we saw is we got a lot more students that are especially really talented students shifting away from the research towards the more group projects, which is okay, but not the best thing for them. And the other thing we noticed, especially talking to the PA program that a lot of our students feed into, right, is that we didn't have a really good process set up to prepare at the capstone level our students for that PA program. So we're looking at revitalizing the capstone experience or the senior thesis experience starting in the spring of 22 or this next upcoming spring to have a couple different things. One is encouraging independent research with students. The second thing that we're introducing that's brand new is advanced experimental labs. And so we're gonna have a faculty member really guiding students through research in more of a group setting, but really doing independent research in a lab, pushing the boundaries of questions that haven't been asked before and are potentially publishable as well, which is really exciting. And then the third thing about this, or the second new part, is that Dr. John Laird, who just retired from the PA program, is going to come back to us and work with us in the spring as an adjunct. And he's going to be introducing a problem-based learning clinical case study course for our pre-PA students. And what we're hoping this is going to do is going to take our Chatham students that are finishing up in that spring, taking that capstone and starting in the PA program in the fall, hitting the ground and running and already practicing the really difficult approach and successful approach they do at that PA level. So we're helping to prepare our students. So we're really excited about those initiatives. Outside of that, the other things we're doing to reinvigorate student research, one is the research day. So we've had a science research day for the past 3 years, and maybe 4, I think it's 3. And that's happens at the end of every spring, where there's a conference, if you will, of student doing posters and presentations and other things where we gather all the science students together to have no classes, but a research day. That's really exciting. We were able to get that through the pandemic and have it happen virtually, which was really cool as well. But we're looking to continue to grow that. We're looking at ways to incorporate the School of Health Science research, maybe even incorporating psych into this as well for 22 spring. And the other really exciting thing is Dr. John Dubé, who's been really working on a lot of this for us, has just started a new undergraduate peer-reviewed online journal. And so any students that maybe are developing research as part of this, they can't quite get their papers into a major journal, they're going to be able to publish and practice and write and submit through a peer-reviewed process that Chatham runs as a science journal, so that they get that experience and they can actually publish their data and they can put it on a CV, which is really great. So not the highest impact factor, but an experience, which was awesome. Outside of that, the other things we're working on is how do we get students involved in research earlier and more often. And so in the honors program, we've looked at developing an intro to research methods course for first-year students. We've been doing that for a couple years now, and our plan, and starting in 22-23, is to roll that out for all science students as well. So a 1-credit first-year professional development course that they can easily put in their schedule. We could staff pretty easily, and they could get introduced to research methods early to get encouraged to do that. Outside of that, we're looking at discovery-based teaching labs. We recently hired Welcome Pope from the University of Pittsburgh, and she had developed, along with her collaborator there, a program called CPhages, which is kind of nationally recognized, and there's collaborators all across the US. But the idea of this is having biology research labs in particular that students are gathering data that has never been done before, never been explored, and publishing that data. So really kind of investigative exploration, as opposed to traditional labs, which tend to be more of follow this recipe and get the results that you expect. So some really neat stuff there. We're having this at the first year biology lab level starting in 22, and then moving that into the microbiology and higher levels as well. Outside of that, we also want to explore more external activities, including research summer opportunities for our students to work together more Deal grant funding and other things that are great, or other funds for our faculty here to do research. We'd also like to see the possibility of some support happening on the campus where we're able to have maybe people outside of the sciences, but having somebody dedicated to help students apply for Fulbrights, Goldwater scholarships, maybe even graduate research fellowships, so that they can hit the ground running at that next stage. And then finally, something else we're talking about maybe exciting is creating a research professional certificate, where if you've done a couple semesters of independent study, and you've done something else, you've done a summer opportunity, done a couple other things related to that, it's really half-baked. We haven't figured it all out yet, but the idea would be that you can recognize students for going above and beyond in research, and maybe parallel to the honors program as well. Okay. Looking at faculty research, which is also obviously important to talk about in the direct link here, really excited about all the amazing faculty research that's happening here at Chatham. We really have, I tried to cluster this into 3 kind of silos to kind of show some of the neat things we're doing. So on the human health side, and this great picture here is from Dr. Ethan Block. It's dopamine transport, and you're measuring kind of the transporters in this red dye and some really neat stuff in the brain, and in his work in diseases there as well. And so we have areas all across the human health spectrum. We're looking in a lot of areas in terms of energy and materials and development in that regard too. And this is just in the sciences, not to mention our potential interactions with the other schools as well, and other communities in Chatham, around the Pittsburgh area and outside of that. And in the evolution and ecology front, we have a lot of kind of surplus of talents as well, looking at those again, which matches up really nice with the Falk School of Sustainability, as our human health does with the School of Health Sciences. And then the last part that I'm not really talking about, but we have a lot of people working on as well, or isn't listed here, is pedagogical development, or teaching instruction, and really pushing the boundaries of that. So we have lots of people working on that too. We'll talk briefly here in a couple minutes. The second initiative we want to talk about is recalibrating social dynamics. And I know this is kind of a cliche slide to a certain degree, but the idea here is that on the surface, we think about students having to balance academics. They have lots more things to balance than that, especially in this past year, as we all have. And so how are we helping our students and our faculty really not just have an environment that supports their academic growth, but supports all these other things that are really important and tend to be kind of the things that help academics. If they're all supported, academics tend to flourish, and if they're not, they tend to drop. So these are really important. When we look at the social dynamics for students, we want to think about the general support we're giving them. And there's a lot of ways that Student Affairs is doing this for us as well. And our Office of Academic and Resource Center is doing this. But how are we doing some things on ground more, especially as we come out of this pandemic, with department events and bringing those back, including festivals we have in the fall, or our Science Research Day in the spring? How are we getting our clubs? We have lots of science clubs back and rejuvenated, and giving them more support and getting more students involved with that. And maybe one of the biggest things, and of course, seminars are on that, getting that more alive and participating. We did some nice things virtually in the past year as well. Maybe one of the more important things that are underrelated is just the atmosphere of seeing people, right? The open door policy that makes Chatham so possible that when students walk in my office and say, "I'm sorry to bother you," and I say, "Please stop me. I don't want to answer any more emails. I'd rather talk to you." You know, this is the unique kind of experience that you get at Chatham, is this personality, this relationship, this community we build. And this is such a big part of that, just having that back. In terms of faculty and staff, what are we giving them financially and space and everything else they need, equipment-wise? How are we making this an equitable environment for our students and our faculty? And then time. We have faculty that are excited about doing all sorts of different endeavors. Some of them initiatives we're seeing here. We have lots of expectations for them. How are we carving out time and giving them opportunities? Something simple like maybe in your 4th or 5th year, as you're preparing for capstone, getting a course release to focus more on your research, or other ways that we're able to help faculty really succeed. You know, that's just one thing. There's lots of things we could do, but they're all things to consider. One of the things we're working on in the sciences, we started this past year, especially in response to the George Floyd and other protests last summer, is the idea of creating a new science subcommittee for diversity, equity, and inclusion in the sciences. And so we began this in the fall. The faculty met, we kicked it off, and included students starting in the spring, and we're going to be adding more students next spring, which is really exciting. The main aims of this are to increase awareness about issues of equity, to make inclusivity, cultural competency, and social equity a substantive part of the science department curriculum, to provide an opportunity for a group of students and faculty to serve as committee members, to increase the representation and quality of experience of historically excluded groups on campus, both at the faculty and staff level and the student level, and to increase support of underrepresented groups in the science department. So these are our kind of major goals, and we have lots of kind of we could spend a lot more time talking about this, but we have lots of great ideas on the horizon and lots of things we really do need to address. Initiative 3, as we're wrapping up here, is really on the instructional method or refining our instructional methods. We'll take pride in our instruction, but we can keep getting better. And so looking at the strategic plan from last year, the idea here is that, if we compare ourselves to Pitt, CMU, Duquesne, we are maybe not going to be this scholarly research kind of in the near future, maybe in the long term in terms of what they're doing. But one thing we can hang our hats on is our teaching as well. How are we able to define ourselves as this premier kind of place to learn and to learn how to teach in the Pittsburgh area? And there's lots of ways that we could go about doing that. But some of the things we want to focus on are external faculty development. We have this great faculty learning community. Dr. Michelle Doyle's been running that for the past year, but really getting a small group together, looking at specific pedagogical problems with the idea of publishing those and increasing kind of that impact of on students in the department. We have a big push on active learning in that area, which is getting students engaged. And it's not just to have fun in class. The point of this is because active learning is directly tied to knowledge retention and understanding and all of those other performance. And so this is shown in the literature to be the way that we need to go for the betterment of our students. We've talked about classroom configurations to make those more accessible for these environments. And we're also working to do more effective teaching evaluations, and there's promotion related things to that. But more importantly, we want to be doing teaching evaluations so that we can grow and learn from those, and we can work together as a community more effectively so that we can continue to benefit our students. Some of the new programming that we've had most recently to talk about or highlight with the BS in Neuroscience program that was just rolled out last year, but the first class of advertised students for that are coming in this fall. And we have 5 students coming in the fall, or make 6 total for the program, which is a pretty good initial class for any program. And we're excited about that. We have the biomedical studies program. We talked about that at the graduate level. We also have a new partnership we're excited about with pre-engineering and CMU. And so our students would take science degrees. They would take some classes at CMU and pre-engineering as part of the Peachy agreement, or their ability to take classes at other universities, 1 class per semester, basically. And then they would get preferred acceptance into the engineering programs at CMU. And so that would be the civil and environmental engineering, the biomedical engineering, or the chemical engineering are the ones that I've been talking to more specifically right now. So that's really exciting stuff that we're hoping to advertise with the missions to kind of get going for 22 and 23 as well, as those are just coming online. And then as our physics program is starting to grow, again, 2 graduates in the past decade, but now we have, I think, 9 students that are physics majors starting in the fall. We have a physics agreement where they basically take some of their physics classes at CMU and a lot of their credits here as well, but we had to kind of revitalize that a bit. So that's exciting. We look at future programming ideas. I think the idea here is that we want to take advantage of our faculty strengths and our kind of what do we have outside of the normal science across this university, right? So what do we have as we start to have better synergy with the Folk School or the School of Health Sciences or outside in the rest of the community? And so one of the ways to look at this is the ecology and environmental biology. We have a strong ecology and environment group, as you saw in that kind of research setting. We have this great tie with School of Health Sciences. Can we make this something bigger at the undergraduate or graduate level? Does that get housed in the sciences or the Folk School? I don't know. It's just an idea to kind of think about this off the cuff right now. It's been brought to my attention recently that there aren't a lot of anatomical sciences degrees at the graduate level across the US. We have a really strong faculty cohort of anatomy in this great human anatomy lab at the School of Health Sciences that I didn't even talk about yet today, which is might be a good drawing factor for that. We can revisit our green chemistry program at the Bachelor's and Master's Science, actuarial science, again, combining business and math, and maybe even a fun one like medical illustration. We had a student do that a couple of years ago as a self-design, but arts, science, easy to put together, no new courses, kind of exciting, might be maybe not bringing a ton of students at first, but be something fun to try. We're also exploring minors and certificates, maybe a green technology or fermentation or the research certificate. The nice things about certificates or minors is maybe sometimes it gives us an idea or an opportunity to just dip our toe into something, to try it without having an overall major that might require hiring more faculty or doing something else. Maybe we can work with what we have and pull that off. So these are some ideas that we're looking at right now. So overall, trying to wrap this up really quick, I know I threw a lot at you, so I'm happy to answer any questions, but we're excited about our study enrollment. It's dominated by a robust biology program with steady growth in other majors. We have these student-centered initiatives that we really focus all of our growth on, or all of our initiatives are based on students and their growth and how we can support them. So reinvigorating student research, recalibrating social dynamics, and refining instructional methods. And I think there's a lot of growth potential still, not only, of course, because of where we're located and in our field, but these new programs that we're excited about, not to mention all these additional opportunities, not even listed. So with that said, thank you again for your time and for listening to me today. And I'm more than happy, like I said, to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you so much, Rob. We appreciate that. And also want to say, I noticed we were joined by Dr. Feingold and Dr. Templeton. Welcome. Since we've got such a small group, rather than having everybody sit there and type into the chat, why don't we just open it up? Please unmute, speak up, let us know whatever questions you've got. We'd love to hear from you.
The engineering program, does that end up with a bachelor degree from CMU, or is that going to the graduate school? And how is that being received, and how does that work?
Great. That's a great question. Thank you so much for asking it. So it would be a bachelor's degree in science from Chatham and a master's degree in engineering from CMU. And in fact, if we really kind of look at this and these discussions came up, the engineering programs at CMU are trying to increase their numbers. They're trying to increase the diversity. They're trying to attract local talent. Generally, if you go onto their websites, you can get a degree in any science, basically, and then they'll accept you into the civil and environmental engineering program or the biomedical and engineering program. So what we're doing is we're advertising it as a way to really attract students, to prepare them to use this Peachy agreement so they get a little bit of a leg up going into that graduate program, and then they would have early acceptance into the graduate program there. They're all disconnected financially, they're disconnected other ways. The way that I see it is a way that we are able to market students as this longer term trajectory, maybe going after some funding opportunities at the larger level as well that I'm excited about. Outside of that, we're also going to be working with CMU. We've already talked to them about having their graduate students, maybe existing Chatham students once they get to that level, but working in student groups with our undergraduate students so that they're able to go over there and get involved in research labs, and the students are able to come back and help our students out. So it will be we'll have a faculty member dedicated to helping those students. We'll have CMU, we'll have a faculty member, we'll have people going back and forth between the two programs. So it's a nice little kind of cooperative with our neighbor a couple miles down the road.
Rob, I wondered if you could share a little about, obviously the labs were particularly challenging to have adapted under COVID. And so how the science faculty adapted. And then as you think about, that future of keeping Chatham's education really distinctive, are there things that you found worked among the faculty during this time that you'd like to keep, even as we're getting back to more of the traditional in-person delivery in the fall?
Great questions. Thank you so much. Yeah, so the labs, we did a lot. Our facilities, I have to give them so much credit. They're amazing, and working with them, they're absolutely fantastic. And so in terms of infrastructure, we made safety precautions at all sorts of things, had one-way halls, had stairwells, you can only go in one direction. We hung plexiglass from the ceilings to fit more students without having a barrier between them, even with masks. We had all sorts of other things going on. A typical lab section might have 20 students in it. Instead of having 20 students, we would have 3 rotating sections of 6 to 8 students coming in instead, so that we could socially spread them out. And the amount of work that the faculty, and I can speak directly to the sciences, and I'm sure it's happening across the campus, but I have to give them so much credit because the amount of kind of reimagining how they taught this past year required many, many hours outside of kind of their typical job just to stay ahead and provide, again, the students what they needed. Outside of that, when we talk about kind of the lecture scenario, we were recording students. Chatham had a policy where faculty could decide if they did or didn't want to have on-ground classes also recorded, but every science faculty member either had Zoom, was on ground, or had both. If they were on ground, they had both and they recorded. So students, if they were on ground or not on ground, were able to have access to this material. One of the things we noticed, students really liked having recorded lectures. So one way to do this is I recorded a lecture last fall, and I'm going to use it this fall, and it's similar. A student goes on a sports trip. They're away for a competition and they can't come to class. Well, here's a video you can watch instead, and it's there for you. But we also know that faculty change, and that's not going to meet for the long-term future. And so I'm already working with Lauren Patton, who is our IT specialist, and we're looking at the classrooms in Buell to see if there's ways that we can make that even more easy, so that we're easy to record, easy to put onto the learning management software, and to get our students that materials. So I think that's the biggest growth we're going to have, is really that ability to share. Now, if a student's sick or away or something else, maybe they're able to Zoom into a classroom, but I think we're trying to get more away from the active participation of students being there in a Zoom, but maybe more in an asynchronous supportive function, because we really value the on-ground experience really matters a lot. And we've noticed that a lot this year for sure. But again, we've been able to do a lot of on-ground stuff over this past year, just very safely.
And just as a quick follow-up to that, for those students who weren't comfortable being in person, so you mentioned how much effort the faculty made to adapt the labs.
Yeah.
A lot of them, some of the students studying virtually, how were we able to sort of meet their lab requirements? Did they defer it till when they can be back, or did we figure out ways for them to do it?
Yeah, for most of the labs, we had them, if they absolutely had to. There's only really a small handful of students that couldn't be on ground at all. And so those small, depending on the lab, some of them they were able to do all virtually, but a lot of times, like, we offered this every semester, let's just squeeze it in another semester, you'll be okay. So that was our general approach for this, so that they didn't miss out on that opportunity. But again, going back to this, there's a lot of content we generated that's really useful later on that we could find ways to do this. Again, I have a conference scheduled for the 5th week of the semester. Let's have a virtual lab. I already have all the stuff developed. We can do those sort of things. So there's a lot of neat ways that we can take advantage of this in the future. But again, because of this rotation, if you were a student that came in every 3 weeks to lab or every 2 weeks to lab, that 1 week you're in lab, that you weren't in lab, or the 2 weeks you weren't in lab, you weren't sitting and twiddling your thumbs. We had lots of content that was generated that was virtual laboratory type experiments. It is not the same as being on ground, but it was able to process the data, to present the data, to work other ways. And honestly, again, giving all the credit, I didn't teach a lab course this semester, so I can't give myself this year, I can't give myself any credit, but for the faculty that did, man, it's such a Herculean effort that they were able to pull it off.
Let's see. Do we have many students coming from other schools to take advantage of our programs and with this Peachy agreement?
We do. I just taught a student this past semester, who was a Carnegie Mellon student who's in organic chemistry. We're taking organic chemistry with me. That's a good question. I don't know. The Falk School might be a good way to figure out if those specialty classes or classes that don't exist at other schools that exist here. So our students for Peachy classes do it for one of two reasons. One is they want to just take the class and they can't fit it in their schedule at Chatham, or they fell behind a semester and they want to graduate on time, so they're taking it somewhere else to stay on top. Or the second reason is they are a 4th year student and they want to take a class in nanochemistry, and we don't have a nanochemistry class, but Pitt has a great nanochemistry program down there. So go down the road, learn about that, so you can go on to that next stage where you want to be a nanochemist as a PhD or a graduate student. One, I don't know. I'm not sure right now, and this is something we definitely need to think about. What are we doing in the sciences that isn't happening somewhere else where they want us to hunt us down and to come here for?
Yeah.
But I think outside of that, most of the students that are coming from other schools are coming with the idea of the first thing for Chatham students is they can't fit into their schedule or something else, or they want to stay ahead, so they're just taking it somewhere else and they're taking it here.
Actually, Rob, I can add to that. We get
Great.
a fair number of CMU students coming over for our anatomy. CMU's biology is very heavily focused at the cell molecular level. They don't have a lot of anatomy or larger system courses. And so we get a number of students who are interested in pre-med or pre-vet coming over either as NDS students or through cross-registration to take our anatomy courses at both the undergraduate and graduate levels.
Yeah, and I think we need to continue to think about ways that we're using that human anatomy lab in particular. It's such a great selling point. Our students absolutely love it, and the instruction there is amazing. So that's a great point.
Rob,
Go ahead.
No, please, Murray.
How do the finances work when there's interchange between the schools? Are we compensated when we're teaching and vice versa, or not? Anybody know?
I don't know the answer to that.
I do. The good news for us is that as of right now, there's no money transfer. So the Peachy really works on kind of a good colleague kind of system. And so the reason I say good news is I think Pitt and CMU are the two institutions which do a lot more of the teaching than they do of sending students out, just because of their size and the scope of things. I mean, it's great, I think, for our students when we're getting CMU students over, as was mentioned. But generally, that's worked really well. The exception to that, and Jenna may know more on this, but I don't know, Rob, in what you've discussed with the physics, where we are getting an institution to commit to offering a course that we need for our students to major. That's where you might get into some exchange of things. If it's filling empty seats, because each institution gives preference to their own students in registration, then usually there isn't. But if you had to provide something specifically, that's where there might be something.
Yeah, I don't know the exact, I'm actually in talks right now with student accounts to get the exact numbers for how we compensate the physics at CMU. That's the one program I know about in the sciences, as David mentioned, that we are exceeding the Peachy agreement. So a typical student that is getting a physics degree from Chatham takes all their gen ed classes from Chatham, they take their math classes from Chatham, and they take their first couple physics classes at Chatham. But at the time, right now, we only have physics 1 and 2 because we don't have enough physics students to go above that. And there's no other majors that need above physics 2. And so the remaining of their physics classes, which ends up being 7 classes that they need to take at CMU to graduate. So they take 2 per semester, their second year through their fourth year, with the exception of the last semester where they take 1 class there. But so they're taking 2 in their sophomore, junior, and senior year at a time at CMU. That's the one unique degree that we have in that regards. Generally, we encourage students to not take, and we actually normally don't permit, unless it's an extenuating circumstance, students to take major courses outside of Chatham, because we want, if they're getting a major and a degree from Chatham, we want them to be taking Chatham courses to represent that.
Rob, I was wondering if you could share a little, you mentioned our new professor, Dr. Pope, and the exciting work that she's doing with students in publishing, and just to give people a feel for, this discovery of new organisms. And then you mentioned that for Buell, that we're really, so much at capacity now. Could you give a sense of, one of the first things we're hoping to do in the new capital campaign is the extension of Buell, what you see tied into that vision you outlined for the growth of the department? What are the biggest needs you see in terms of those new labs or other spaces that we would be utilizing within that?
That's great. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. So Dr. Welcome Pope is fantastic. We hired her. She started this past fall. In fact, besides her interview, the first time I met with her in person was a couple of weeks ago. So everything was virtual up until then, which is really interesting. And she's fantastic. So at Pitt, she was at Pitt as a postdoc and as a research professor for a decade. And in her time there, she was instrumental in developing a nationally recognized program called C-phages. And what they do is they isolate bacteriophages and they identify them. And there are so many of these bacteriophages around the world that basically all of us could be isolating them and identifying them the rest of our life, and we would barely touch the surface of them. And so what this does is it allows students to learn the techniques of finding these, isolating them, see where they come from, seeing that they can discover something that nobody's ever seen before, identifying that, getting all the data behind that, and then they publish that. And so she's had publications with like 120 students on it, and they're publishing it together as in the highest impact journal as well, but getting students involved with that. And the idea of that research, again, is shifting towards more of a guided inquiry or a research lab where you are really doing unexplored research. The techniques are being used and stuff, but you're doing published things that people haven't done before. And so she's working really closely with Colleen Barrett, who has been in the biology, working with us for 25 plus years in biology and does all our first year biology labs. So starting in fall of 22, because they didn't want to rush it out the door, and we want to have a lot of things to put in place. But all our first year biology students will be doing this investigative throughout the entire year. So that first year, all of their first year biology are going to be, let's explore problems we've never done before, never seen the answers to, which is super exciting. And then of course, Dr. Pope has some great ideas in the microbiology and the environmental microbiology that she teaches and ecology that she's teaching with the Falk School of Sustainability of ways to do this at that level. And then of course, the next point for me is to say, how do we do this with everybody? But we'll get there eventually. That's the goal. Outside of that, what else do we have? Fuel capacity. So yeah, we are pushing a little bit. If we're thinking about what we need to do, the easiest thing to say is a little bit of everything is what we need. But I really want, I've said this a bunch of times to my colleagues, and I want to keep thinking about this as we get to that point I want to be thinking about what else are we kind of introducing that isn't just going to be spreading our elbows a little bit, but it's saying, what's our new program? What's our new impact? What's going to attract students into this new space as we kind of roll out this building? And then that'll help us shape what we actually need too. So if that's a pre-engineering program, which is a big thing, or something else, what does that really look like? Who do we need to hire to actually fill that space and to teach those? Those are a lot of things that go together. But we're at capacity for faculty space offices. We have no offices left. We have no faculty research spaces. In fact, this summer, we're working with facilities to take an old prep lab and turn it into a faculty research lab so that a new hire starting in the fall has a place to do research. And you can see our teaching labs and classrooms are getting to capacity. So we need a little bit of everything. There's some creative design on how we do that. What do these new research spaces look like? Do we create a new analytical instrumentation lab that's more modern and then use that lab for something else in the old building? Do we create teaching labs where instead of having one teaching lab that does general bio, we have a cluster of 3 or 4 or 2 labs where they're both running the exact same course at the same time with one head teacher that's able to have TAs and we're able to do more effectively. And that's what a lot of bigger schools do. They'll run 16 sections of general chemistry at the same time, and they'll have one person that's kind of that point person. We're not going to get that big right away, but we could be thinking about ways that we're able to be more effective in terms of staffing our teaching labs for sure and timing those. So again, maybe another bigger space, but I would get away from a space like Beckwith where it's stadium seating, and I would like to see more active learning, modern, engaging in students, getting them involved together. You know, what are the cutting edge of these active learning spaces? Because if we're not planning for that, then we're already behind.
Rob, thank you. That we've got a lot to talk about with the new building and new ideas. And I want to be respectful of everyone's time. We've covered a lot of material today, but let's maybe, do we have one last question for Rob? Because I think we do need to wrap up and let people get on with their day. Anybody have one more thing that you'd like to ask?
Well, I'm happy to stick around for a few minutes afterwards. If anybody else has any additional questions, if you want to email me, I'm happy to do that as well, and happy to set up another appointment.
Yes, Rob, I'll share your email address in the follow-up.
Yeah, I don't have any questions, but I thought this was very helpful. It was a great opportunity to learn more, and I really appreciated it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's been great to talk to all of you.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I
Thank
just,
you all for attending.
I just wanted to end by thanking Rob for the excellent presentation, crammed a huge amount in. I think you all see the exciting work that's happening in the sciences. With summer coming, this is the last of this series we're doing for this academic year, but would really welcome any suggestions folks have for topics or areas they'd like to learn more about as we think about putting it together for the next year. So please, if you have those ideas, Dana just posted a quick survey, but send us an email, take the survey, let us know your thoughts, and we look forward to doing this. But I hope everybody has a great holiday weekend ahead. And thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good holiday.